Hey Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. This time with a quote by Carl Gustav Jung, where he says, I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. Please share your thoughts on this one with us today. What do you think about becoming and the action versus the reaction?
Yeah, it's a wonderful quote. Great to be back, my friend. And to me, this is a model of a certain mentality toward agency in our life, having a high degree of self-agency or seeing that events in our life don't merely happen to us, but they are opportunities for us, and they are things that we interact with, and that even the difficult challenges that face us are opportunities for us to grow and opportunities for us to evolve and to lean in and to experience new things and to expand ourselves outside of where we've been before. And this is an antidote for what I think comes naturally to many of us, which is more of a victim mentality. When things happen to us against our wishes, there's a way of being where we just feel sad for ourselves, or we just tell ourselves a story about how we are the victim of circumstances. This thing happened to me, and I would be better off if it never happened. And he's showcasing here a sense of agency, a sense of growth mindset, and a sense that the things that happen to us are an opportunity for us to become something new and something more than what we would be if we didn't have these challenges before us. What do you think about this?
So I think also there's a distinction between the growth mindset and the victim mentality. If you think you become what happens to you, you think, okay, I can do nothing, and that's what it is. And if shit hits the fan, then you don't try. You don't even try because you believe already that you cannot do anything about it. But there again is that belief becomes real in its consequences. Because you believe it, you don't even try. But also the other way around. Because you believe you can do, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. I think this is the hint, the sign of okay, belief becomes real in its effects. Um, and if you find opportunities to grow and turn things that happen into something to become and choose to react in a certain way, um, then you will have a higher chance of shaping your life in the way you want it to look like. What do you think about shaping life and how is it possible?
Yeah, I think to this about, or this makes me think about the subtle but at the same time massive difference between drowning versus swimming. And all of us are kind of in this endless, unpredictable flow of this current of the ever-changing nature of existence. And to swim versus to drown and thrash against the water are kind of similar in a sense. We're kind of moving our limbs in the same way. We might have a similar goal, and we might have a certain physiology that we're working with, a certain buoyancy that our body may naturally have. But those of us that have been swimming and those of us who have been drowning can really recognize just how different it is to do one versus the other. And in fact, our desperation to control the situation and struggle against it when we're drowning actually makes us much worse swimmers, actually can make us so much less effective at navigating the choppy waters that we find ourselves in. And the same thing is true in how we live our lives, in how we live the or how we respond to the unpredictable and uncontrollable circumstances and events that happen before us. We can have this sense of fighting for survival and struggling against it, or we can have this sense of flowing with it And it can be kind of doing a lot of the same things on the outside, but this inner posture of swimming versus drowning or struggling and fighting versus flowing can totally change the power that we have in these circumstances, as well as obviously in tandem, the pleasantness or unpleasantness of where we find ourselves. And fortunately, those two things can go in the same direction. And fighting for this sense of survival out of fear and out of contraction and out of this defense mechanism of wanting to control everything can actually vastly disempower us. They can change us from this posture of swimming and flowing into this posture of struggling and drowning, where we're kind of trapped in place and fighting against ourselves in all of events rather than moving and flowing with it. What do you think about that?
That's a good hint you give between the inner posture towards things that happen, towards your life in total. Your inner posture counts so much because it decides how the information which comes into your brain and into your senses get interpreted. You can literally change your life if you change what you believe. You can shape your life through shaping your control system, which is your brain. If you miscarry your brain and feed it shit like Telegram channels with fake news or whatever, which are obviously like for advertising some stuff and pushing it into pushing it into like consumers and trying to shape the narrative in a certain way or whatever. Or if you consume only like the news or like only gossip media, whatever. If you consume shit, your brain will eventually decay. Like your judgment will be worse off if you read from biased sources. If you only consume biased sources, you will change your belief to be biased towards the sources you feed it. But there's this kind of danger because you don't want to have your control system be without a good judgment. And a good judgment is methods of thinking which don't lead you away from what is true. And I'm not confident to ever reach or come towards what is true. But I can be confident about knowing what is probably, with very high likelihood, bullshit. And I'm very confident that I can find out what is true through, not what is true, but that I can like reduce the error from straying further away from the truth through a better method. Maybe it is like hypothesizing and then trying to experiment and then trying to analyze the data and then see whether your model and your hypothesis fits the model and try to reduce the error because you find something new which your thinking provided the error for. And I always, all the time, I think some things, maybe about politics or maybe about world events that happen, and I think to myself, oh no, these suckers, oh, what happened again? And then I think, maybe this is too short of a clip, and maybe this clip doesn't contain the context in which it was like expressed. So, and it happens, and then I see the whole context around the clip, and I think, oh, this was totally taken out of context, and it it shaped the reaction I had towards this kind of clip, which it was ripped out of context. And then this happens all the time, and the more it happens, and I see that with context, the meaning totally changes. Then I think to myself, next time I see a clip, which is only short and ripped out of context, this triggers me, but I'm pretty sure there's things I don't see about that. Maybe find out what I don't see about that. Maybe I try to find out from different sources, and try to get the context so that I can have a proper judgment about it. And if I don't, then I don't judge it. So, so I'm allowed to have no opinion about things that happen, and it is totally fine. And with this kind of agency, with this inner posture of, okay, I have the ability to figure things out. I believe that I can find out what is false or what is truer than another thing. And then I can go and act and take action, because action produces information. And with this new kind of information, you can iterate upon this information again so that you reduce your error of being wrong. What I want to do is not be right, but I strive to be less wrong with every iteration. And sometimes it's the other way around, but strive to be less wrong. So
That is a
I choose, yeah, I
that is
choose
an
to be,
keep going. Sorry.
I choose to try to be less wrong. So now I wanted to give the ball back to you.
Yeah, and that's a really important antidote for something that is so natural to us, which is this underlying implicit assumption that my interpretation of the outside world is not even an interpretation, that I am just seeing the world objectively as it is, that my opinions reflect fundamental, inarguable reality, that the things that I see, the experience that I have, the view that I have of how the world works or how my own life flows within the world is objective truth, is reality as it is. When in reality, we commonly underestimate the insane power that our thoughts have as a mediator of all experience. That there isn't just stimulus projecting on a blank, unaltered mirror, and we're witnessing the exact only way to see reality exactly as it is, but rather there's all these inputs, there's all these senses, there's all this language, there's all these thoughts, and then there's the conditioning of our minds, and they are constantly being thrown in here, blended up, and then spit out after they've been kind of regurgitated and interpreted through the lens of our experience, through the lens of our mind. And it's so true that this filter can get more and more twisted, more and more contracted, or dirty, or contaminated, or whatever we want to, however we want to describe it in this metaphor. And we should really take a close look at the filter itself, rather than just assuming everything that comes out on the other side is exactly as it objectively entered into the filter, because it's the very nature of our minds to interpret experience. It's the very nature of our senses to actually be projecting these fundamental stimuli into some projector screen of our awareness. It is not this scene, it is not this scene of light and color that is just projecting on a blank screen in the back of my skull. Rather, it is photons and it is wavelengths of light that is going through this tiny little opening in the front of my eyeball, smacking upside down on the backside of my retina, transferring electrical signals into the 40% of my brain that plays around with visual imagery. And then all of a sudden, this vision appears. And it happens the same when I'm dreaming as when I'm awake. It's the same parts of my brain, even when there are not photons hitting my eyeballs. And all of our senses work this way. It's a creation within our minds that is caused by external stimuli, but it is not actually a direct, I am witnessing sight as it actually is. I am witnessing hearing or sounds as they actually are. These are, in some fundamental sense, creations within our mind that happen through these many, many multifaceted lenses of how our brains construct the external world, or how our brains construct our ideas and our frameworks about the external world and interpret them. And that is what we ultimately experience in each moment. And so we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that the opinion I have, the way I'm seeing things, is actually reality as it is, unperturbable or unchangeable by my mind. In fact, it's the opposite. It is our mind that actually creates the reality using and shaping the inputs of our experience.
So there's some connection issues, but I think thoughts as a filter can get twisted, like you said. And it's also very important to avoid extreme ideology, because it can be like a shortcut, like not a shortcut, but a short circuit inside your brain. And if you have a short circuit inside your brain, you are pretty much prone to the bias of confirmation, which everybody is. That's how the brain works. But to be less wrong, you have to know how the human mind and the human brain is biased. And there happen to be some biases, and Danny Kahneman wrote a book about that, Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a recommended read, or at least a summary of the biases. And one of them is the confirmation bias, where you only look for evidence in the world which supports your current belief system. This is what you said. Like everything happens inside your brain. You don't see vision as it is. You only see the interpreted sensory inputs. So if you strongly believe that your husband or wife like put the cheese on a very much different place than where you try to find it right now in the fridge, and then you don't see it despite it being in front of your eyes. And just like that, your reality, your subjective reality can get very, very blurred. So it's important to avoid extreme ideology. What do you think about that, Peyton?
Yeah, it goes back to this fundamental question of self-analysis. That is, do you have your opinions or do your opinions have you? When you hear some evidence contrary to some ideology that you currently hold, do you entrench yourself, dig your heels in, and then just try to defend it? Do you feel attacked personally when one of your opinions is, or one of your beliefs, or one of your worldviews comes under scrutiny due to contrary evidence? Or do you become curious? Do you become interested? Do you say, maybe I was off about this. Maybe this thing points that this thing is more nuanced or more complicated, or even the opposite of what I had originally believed. And this doesn't just apply to political ideologies or religious ideologies or whatever systems of philosophy that we may be grasping onto, although that's one area that it certainly arises very commonly, and it's very easy to see in ourselves and others. But another is just in walking our path. This mindset of rather than trying to be right, trying to be less wrong, creates an error correction mechanism and sort of an immune system of our habits and our decisions and our choices in our lives that can help us to have more of a steering wheel on where we're going. It's not that we want to have a car where we just have to set the direction and then there's only gas and it just goes straight and then it runs into something. We need to be able to take in information, kind of be aware of them, let the information flow in, and then see that, oh, I made a miscalculation here, or hey, I made a bet here, the bet wasn't right. And if we can see sooner and sooner, because we're seeking evidence that we are wrong, we are seeking counterfactuals, where we are not just trying to convince ourselves that what we'd originally done is right because we're so perfect and so all-knowing and so smart, then this can afford us the ability to cut the expense drastically of us getting caught off course because we catch it much sooner. We can see that, oh man, I injured myself doing this sport, and I can admit to myself that, oh wow, it's probably because I wasn't paying enough attention to mobility, or it's because I wasn't listening to my body enough, or it's because this thing just happens and the sport is dangerous, and I need to admit to myself that it's not just going to be an always smooth, gradual ascent upwards in whatever I'm pursuing. And if we can recognize this and we're taking this in as, oh, this new harmful or this new painful or this new undesired information is telling me something new. If I try to be right, then I have to kind of create this hall of cognitive distortion where I'm trying to convince myself that I'm some victim and this never should have happened and this is so wrong, and I am fighting against this and I'm justifying why I was still right even though I got the wrong result or whatever. But if I'm trying to be less wrong, then I have the opportunity to truly grow from this. I have the opportunity to say that, oh, this is new information. I'm getting my butt kicked by XYZ event or XYZ circumstance or XYZ trend. And now, because I can see this and I can recognize that, oh, I was wrong right here, now I have the opportunity to become less wrong, which is a really important meta skill to be less held, less gripped, less owned, less possessed by the things that we've said in the past, by this bias for consistency that, as I think it was Thoreau said, or maybe it was Emerson, that the desire for constant consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. It's this small part of ourselves that always wants to be right, that always wants to hold on to this self-image of omniscience, that I have always perfect judgment and I'm just so smart about all these things. And it's just these things that I am a victim of that never should have happened, that are outside of my control, but I'm still right, even though, but I just am a victim of this circumstance and blah, blah, blah. This weakens us if we have this ego voice telling us that we are always right and we never made a mistake, even if this thing obviously played out unexpectedly against our will. And this opportunity to become less wrong, on the other hand, can have us saying that, oh, wow, I shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. I can understand why I did that. I can forgive myself for doing that. And I can
Mhm.
use this as an opportunity to learn that, hey, I should pay more attention when I make a bet like this. Or, hey, I should put more emphasis on preventing certain types of errors. Or I should expect that I'm going to make an error 25% of the time I make a decision. And so I should make my decisions with the right amount at stake when I make them. Or I should recognize that certain decisions, I should get advice from more people beforehand. Or I should know that when I make a decision that has consequences that will play out over time, I better monitor how it's going and I better be quick to admit that, oh, this thing is off track. I probably have something new to learn from this. And that is a really useful meta skill to make our mistakes much less costly and be able to kind of right the ship and have a better steering wheel along the way. What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on the
man.
steering wheel and faster reactivity or faster responsiveness to the feedback of the real world?
Yeah, what you describe with the error correction mechanism is, in a sense, the Western civilization, Western society with its democracy, where every 4 years or whatever, however many years, there's this kind of circle. People can choose, or the system can like replace, and so on. So this is in effect an error correction mechanism, but it doesn't say it doesn't produce errors. So, but the system in itself is set up for correcting errors so that it cannot happen, so that one dictator can say, oh, I like power, I just stay for 50 years or whatever. So because now I want to extract wealth for myself and for the elite, which I choose, like Putin does with its oligarchy. um, so that cannot happen in the West, because if you have democracy and try to, as a people, uh, like hold up the system, then there is this error correction mechanism. And this, in effect, is also true for your control system in your brain. If do you have your opinions, or do your opinions have you? This is a beautiful phrase you said. Do your opinions have you? And if you find it out, you can find it out if you just are triggered by some things, but cannot really explain why, or cannot really explain your reasoning behind it. Just say, no, I don't have to explain it. So that is a perfect, perfect visibility, discovery of your ego need just getting fulfilled, because you just want to be right. And yeah, you have to have kind of this error correction mechanism if you really want to hone your judgment. But if you want to lose your judgment, forget about it. Just say you are right about everything, even if you haven't read a single book on this topic, whatever. And we are not what happened to us, we are what we choose to become if we have this kind of high agency, this growth mindset, this mentality of, okay, I will be wrong. I know if I do stuff, I know I will take missteps. But I want to analyze where I took the wrong step. And I don't want to take big risks in terms that I get ruined, but I want to take these kind of small risks where I can learn from it and stay in the game long enough to still be able to learn. So this is also very important to survive, and don't be led astray by snake oil salesmen which want to use your consistency bias to sell you stuff. That's the perfect, like, this is one of the 7 principles of sales which Robert Cialdini discovered from watching all the salesmen. Consistency. You want to be consistent with the version of yourself you stated yourself to be. And a salesman in China made me buy a dress because he used my consistency bias. And I said, I think this is nice. I think it's beautiful. How much would you pay for it? I wouldn't pay that much. I would pay less. Yeah. And he wrote it down as if I had wrote it down. Yeah, you said you would pay that for that. And I said, oh, yeah, I said that. Okay, here. And then I bought a dress. Never wore it once. This is the human mind in action, you know? This is consistency bias. But if you're totally path independent, you also are able to shape your identity anew when new information comes in. Not just data. Not just data. Information is data with good judgment and like stuff that really can help you. And I am what I choose to become. Yesterday, I was trying to decide whether I should go for a hike, for a beautiful climb in the mountains, or just be lazy and chill at the lake. And then I thought to myself, hey, I can choose this. I can just say I'm going to do this, then I can prepare myself for it, and then I can go. And just like that. And then I chose to become a person who goes into the mountain, because a person who goes in the mountains, and I love the mountains, has an adventure maybe, and has some optionality. And yeah, what do you choose to become, Ben?
Yeah, it's a decision that perhaps we make differently depending on which arena of our life it's in at the moment, or what state of our mind we are in at the moment. And what you point out as far as this consistency bias is one of many examples of this, the way that, so to speak, our opinions or our thoughts can have us. In other words, our attachment to certain ideas that we've said or certain ideas that we hold about ourselves can be a trap. And I experienced this not too long ago, actually, in my business when I had a vision that I saw that seemed clear, that was compelling, that I understood, that blah, 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 I saw playing out. And to pursue this vision, I took various bets. And then some of them went well, some of them didn't go well. But I was so attached to this vision. I was so attached to, on some level, I wasn't admitting this to myself, but I was attached to being right about this, or to being a good entrepreneur, or to doing things well, or to having good judgment. And that attachment to this story about myself and my capabilities actually led me to become blind to certain errors I had made. Not that everything was an error, but some things obviously were, and it became more and more compelling for me to almost superimpose this alternate interpretation of how great things were going and materializing in front of my head, in front of my face, even as certain signals from reality were coming in the opposite, to the point where I was kind of fighting to hold on to a certain notion of how things were, as opposed to letting go of all my attachment to being right, or to things playing out a certain way, and recognizing which things were errors, which things were going really well, what I needed to change course on, and what I needed to double down on, with a sense of fluidity. And this this brought me to a point where I had to recognize that, oh shit, these certain things are not going well. And then I finally had to admit to myself that, oh, I had done some things well. I had made certain mistakes. I had made an error of becoming too attached to my vision, to the point where I believed that it would happen on a certain timeline, even though I didn't have evidence of the timeline of how these things would play out. And then I felt how, as soon as I could admit that to myself, that yes, of course I made some mistakes. Of course I am the type of person that makes mistakes, because everybody is the type of person that makes mistakes. Of course, some things will go my way. Of course, some things won't. And of course, I don't have ultimate control over the entire unfolding of the universe. Some things will happen against my will. Some things will happen just as I want. And all of this admitting, all of this letting go, all of this release of the grip that certain opinions or certain thoughts had had over me was incredibly freeing. And it allowed me to regain more agency, more optionality over my choices, and less grip, less imprisonment, and less attachments to the things that I had decided or the things that I had thought or the opinions that I'd had in the past. And this is super, super important for us to be able to, once again, steer our lives in a wise and responsive and an aware way. And so that's something that is a lesson that I continuously need to learn and relearn, because I make that mistake all the time in this journey. And it's always going to be something that happens to some extent, I assume, in many of us. But it's a very, very useful reminder to become less desire less to be right, because that's just kind of attachment, or holding on to something that may or may not be, and instead embrace a desire to be less wrong, to observe and discover all of the ways that I am incorrect, all of the errors that I have made to this point, because that is where the opportunity is to grow, to change, to adjust, to respond, and to navigate a complex and unpredictable and uncontrollable journey and world. So that is an intention I have, and certainly one that I will need to revisit many times along the way. What about you, man? Any final intentions or takeaways from this that you're marinating on?
So now, thanks for sharing, man. Accepting that we are like flawed individuals and make errors, and every action we take has a potential or possibility to produce some kind of misstep. We can accept that, and we can accept that we can improve, and we can accept that we can figure things out, and we have the ability to figure things out, but they don't get figured out from top down. Just design the most magnificent plan and then everything works out perfectly. No, that does not work in a complex world. That does not work in such high interconnectedness, and that does not work with all the information flowing around. We are flawed. Everything around is moving and is highly complex, and therefore we cannot dare to think we are not prone to error. So that invites us to accept to accept us as we are, to improve ourselves, and also allow for mistakes, and allow for us not to prematurely attach our identity to a certain kind of outcome, to a certain kind of school of thought, or to a certain kind of ideology or idea, or kind of narrative anybody wants to push into our brains. If we prematurely identify ourselves with, oh, I am that and I am that my whole life, you're basically a slave to this idea. And there's a puppet master who tells the story, and you're just a puppet. But if you think for yourself and have this kind of high agency and say, hey, I'm deviating from that, I think for myself right now, and I don't get that, and I don't accept this thinking. Listen, let's exchange. I'm curious. How come that you come to a thought like that? Or please explain your reasoning and so on. But also, we are biased in a kind of unique way. Everybody's unique. And that's the beauty of getting together and discussing ideas. Because if you have a good friend, then he can or she can show you the ways of thinking which might be possible to improve, and show you maybe errors in your thinking. And if you're true to each other and say, hey, this might not be correct. Listen to my thinking. Let's be curious about that. What is your thinking about that? You cannot do stuff on your own. There is no one who's a self-made man or a self-made woman. You need each other. And that's the strength in teams as well. It enriches your thinking when you share perspectives with each other and discuss it and argue through it and have this kind of meaningful back and forth. So we need the support. And then coming back to the beginning to frame that a little bit, I'm not what happened to me, I am what I chose to become, said Carl Gustav Jung. And I'm immensely grateful for all the support of my friends and especially my family and my parents I received over all the years and over all my life. I'm immensely grateful. And in the same way, Carl Gustav Jung, with 10 years old, with his father, who was a preacher man in Küsnacht at Lake Zurich, came to Lucerne and they saw the Rigi mountain. It's a small mountain close by. And there's a train driving up. And his father had no money left for 2 tickets, but for 1. So he said to the young Carl Gustav, "Hey, Carl Gustav, come, here's the ticket, go up." And Carl Gustav said, "On." And that was the most beautiful scenery I ever saw. And let's support each other. Let's be kind towards each other. Let's be curious about each other's thinking. Everybody has a story. And every philosophy or ideology one has is certainly influenced by autobiography, by the experiences everybody struggles through something. Everybody has his stories or pains or whatever. Let's be kind towards each other. And I'm mistaken often, and I'm not kind always, but I try to improve. And thanks for sharing and thanks for helping, man. And yeah, I have the intention to improve.
Me as well, man. Maybe we be a little less wrong every day. Maybe we be a little less attached and a little less egoic every day. This is
Yeah,
uh,
man.
an intention that will never get old or never become obsolete for me. I'm sure of it. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, my friend.
Always.
I appreciate it as always. I will see you next week.
Appreciate you, man. Always improve. Thanks for sharing. See you soon, man.
Take care.